Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Steve Bihar, and Steve is on the borderline of the 3rd Congressional District of New York, and he's followed George Santos pretty close. So I want to say bye-bye, George Santos. What's your overall impression of what he is and what's transpired?
Well, I mean, this whole thing was a nightmare, and it was particularly a nightmare for those of us in and around the third district. I up until recently had was going to run for that spot, and several times people would come up to me in the district and say, "You've got to run because we've got to get this guy out of here," or "You've got to run because this guy isn't representing us." And we've become a national embarrassment. And unfortunately, the New York Third under George Santos had become a national embarrassment.
Okay, now let me ask you a few questions as we go back in history a little bit. In 2020, he ran against the incumbent.
Tom Swazi.
Yes, and he did not win. But if my understanding is correct, it was pretty close, wasn't it?
It wasn't, no, it wasn't close. It was, nearly 20 points, which is really what that district generally has done over the last couple of decades, both when Tom Swazi was there and also when Steve Israel. Generally, it is not a bright blue district. It's not a red district. It skews blue. But even when Swazi ran or Steve Israel ran, they generally would get 56, 57% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you would expect out of that district. Now, don't forget, they did redistrict this, so it's not exactly the same district.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past, that's what the third district had done. And frankly, this was a district that had voted for Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And it was expected that that district would be a blue district.
Okay, now going back to 2020 again. After the election and before people were sworn in, he went down to Santos went down to DC, and he sat in with all of the other freshmen when he didn't win. Why did he do something like that? That's crazy.
Asking why George Santos does anything is kind of a futile exercise, Cynthia. Why did he do anything that he did? Why did he, make up a whole story about his life? Why did he steal from his friends and contributors? I I don't know. I mean, I don't have a psychology degree. And I think that, that may be, that may be a great, PhD dissertation for some psychology student down the road.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So going up to 2 years ago when Joe Biden won, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. When Kathy Hochul won, okay?
That was last year.
Yeah. The race for governor.
Yes.
So Tom Swazi threw his hat in the ring for governor, and it was an open seat. So George Santos stepped in, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So at that point, if you remember, did the Republicans welcome him with open arms? Do you know that?
Completely. They absolutely adored him. Elise Stefanik, who's a nut job, who's become, completely off the rails, MAGA Trump, openly racist, purporting the white replacement theory. Um, she endorsed him, took pictures with him. Nicole Maliatakis endorsed him, took pictures with him. Vicky Palladino, the council member from Northeast Queens, the 19th district, again, hugging him, embracing him, endorsing him. He was welcome into the party.
Okay. So Tom Schwarz is running for governor, and George Santos steps in to run for that congressional seat. So the Newsday did not cover him much at all, correct?
Yeah, well, in general, the New York press, unfortunately, does a terrible job. And I experienced it myself, where I had a reporter from the New York Daily News when I ran the New York City Council, wrote several phony articles about me, made up stories. I've been a civil rights activist my whole life. I'm a lifetime member of the NAACP. I'm married to a Black woman. I'm raising Black children. I'm counsel to the Haitian American Political Action Committee of New York, and this guy wrote articles saying I'm a racist. I mean, this is unfortunately where the New York press has gone, and a lot of it is the quality of reporters today compared to 20, 30 years ago, and part of it is also the function of journalistic budgets have been stripped. And so the newspapers, the television stations, they don't have the budgets that they have had years ago. And like you said, um, Newsday didn't report this. None of the other New York press did, and nobody in the other New York press dug into it.
Okay. Um, was it a given, since that district leaned blue, that Santos had no chance of winning? Therefore, the press says, why cover him, because he's not going to win anyway?
I don't know if that's what the press was thinking, or if the press was just negligent at its job. I think you're right. I think that going into the elections last year, that most of us, I think both Democrats and Republicans, thought that district was going to be a Democratic district.
Right.
And it was a combination. I don't think, Robert Zimmerman, very nice man, but I don't think he ran a great campaign. And I think that maybe they took it for granted. Maybe the press took it for granted. And maybe, again, the press doesn't seem to want to dig into stuff, which, unfortunately, there's no Jimmy Breslins or Pete Hamels anymore.
Right. Right. And, so there was one weekly that covered it. It covered him, and that caused the New York Times to do a story, but Newsday was nowhere in the picture.
That was that was a newspaper is actually owned by a former Republican candidate, who uncovered that. And I've heard Robert Zimmerman say that his campaign knew a lot of this during the campaign, which to me was a mistake. To me, if I was either the candidate or if I was campaign manager, I've been both at different points in my life. If I had that dirt on George Santos, I would have been screaming it every single day. I would have been mentioning that at every single turn, every single speech I made. I would be pounding that to the point where someone would have to look into it. And the Zimmerman campaign certainly didn't do that. and the press didn't do it. It was negligence. There's plenty of negligence to go around here.
And also, Kathy Hochul didn't do much for Zimmerman. She didn't campaign much in the third district, did she?
I think that was a big problem throughout Long Island, was that there was virtually no ground game for those races. And I was campaign manager for a candidate who was running in the 19th Assembly District in Nassau County. And I was begging for help from various candidates from governor on down. And nobody was interested. Nobody was interested in a ground game. And I think that is ultimately a big reason why Democrats on Long Island haven't done well. And it's not just last year, it's been the last few years. And it's something that I'm concerned about, going forward. Just this past year, the town of North Hempstead, they lost. They had a couple of wins, but they generally lost to the Republicans. And they had a good candidate in John Kamen, who formerly was the supervisor of the town, and there wasn't much of a ground game, and it hurts. I have a friend who ran for the Nassau County Legislature in a seat that probably was going to be a Republican seat, but it was virtually uncontested by the county apparatus. And when I worked on Howard Dean's campaign back in 2004. And after Governor Dean didn't become president, he became the chair of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. And he instituted what we call the 50-state strategy, where we contest every state. And this is something that I don't see happening in Nassau and Suffolk County. There are seats that they just say, all right, well, we're not going to win that. We're not going to contest it. And that hurts in several ways. One way it hurts in the sense that if you leave a legislative seat untouched during a campaign because you think that you're not going to win that legislative seat, you're going to have lower Democratic turnout in that seat for countywide offices and for townwide offices. And also, we're trying to, or we should be trying to cultivate Democratic voters and get them used to going out and voting. You need to talk to people. You need to talk to people about issues. You need to talk to people about making sure that they know where and when to vote. And when you ignore entire legislative districts because you think you don't have a shot there, you're hurting the whole Democratic Party throughout the county.
There's 400 and, well, right now there's 434, should be 435 congressional seats in this country, and only a handful of them are viable according to the party. Okay, so if there's only a handful of seats that they feel can be contested, they will pick those particular seats and put tons of money in it and do the press and whatever else needs to be done. But the rest of the congressional districts, if they're not deemed a race that can be contested, well, the party isn't going to look at them. So you're talking about a lot of races throughout the country that are uncontested. So in those races, you're going to get people like George Santos, who's going to run because nothing's stopping them from doing so. They're not groomed, they don't know how to deal with the press and so forth. So, I think it's a party and also a media. I blame both party and media for, George Santos is like the epitome of absurdity. But there's other candidates who run who might not be qualified either. But if it's an uncontested race, the party doesn't give a damn if they run or not. They don't care because they know that they're not going to win. So I think the George Santos episode is what's wrong with politics today.
Well, I think that to a large degree, you're correct. I heard a political scientist just in the last few days say that of the 435 congressional districts, mainly because of gerrymandering, that there's only 80 seats that are contested,
Mm-hmm.
which is really something that we've got to deal with as a democracy and as a country, because that's really not democracy. When it's not a democracy when politicians choose their voters and the voters aren't choosing the politicians.
Right.
And unfortunately, we've got way too much of that in our system right now. I remember. No, it's funny. I keep repeating this line, and it's almost like I kind of knew what was going on when I was an undergraduate in college, because I wrote a paper as an undergraduate at the University at Albany, um, stating that we need to have independent, nonpartisan um, district drafting
Mm-hmm.
throughout the country, and it's something that probably should be a constitutional amendment for. But the independent redistricting commissions um, do a much better job. And I remember when I wrote this paper, again going back decades ago, there was only one state that had it. It was Iowa. And to this day, if you look at Iowa, the districts are kind of they're square. They take in different communities. They try to keep communities together, but they're concise and compact, like the Constitution says they should be. Where you go into other states, you look at Jim Jordan's seat in Ohio. It looks like a snake, slithering through Ohio, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not what it should be. And this
Mm-hmm.
is why we have a problem. One of the reasons we have a problem with democracy.
And also, I want to bring up another thought on my part. Like you were thinking of running for the third for Santos's seat, okay?
Mhm.
So, and there was a number of other people that threw their hats in the ring also. But then I believe it was the party that convinced Swazi to run again. Is my assumption correct?
There was certainly, certainly a lot of pressure
Uh-huh.
for Tom to run, and Tom's a
Okay.
friend of mine, and I'm going to do everything I can to help him get elected. But I mean, that's understandable. I mean, that seat, we need to flip 5 seats, and let's be clear, this is going to be um, the first of the 2024 elections. And we need to flip 5 seats. There's one right here. That's 20% of the seats we need to flip. So I certainly understand. He's won that seat 3 times. And
Right.
he's certainly, more well known than anybody else who's running
Okay.
on either side. And to me, I decided to run because I was not convinced that there was anyone in the Democratic side um, who could beat a Republican in this race. And my calculus changed when Tom jumped into the race, because clearly he's beaten the Republicans 3 times in that seat.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You and other people had thought of running, and the party decided to back Swazi. So for races that they feel that they can win, the party can win. I don't think they want to take a chance as somebody who they consider an outsider. It's like an insider's game where they choose who they want to be in that seat. What do
Well,
you
I
think?
think there's some validity to that across the entire political spectrum. Whether it's for local government, state government, Congress, the party is going to have their choice, and there's nothing to stop that. But let me be clear: nobody pushed me out from this race. Nobody said, "Steve, you need to get out." Um, and I have no problem with Akeem Jeffries looking at this and saying we need this seat, and we think that Tom Suozzi is the best to take that seat. And like I said, if this was a primary, um, people were going to run against him. I suspended my campaign and tossed my support to Tom Suozzi, but Anna Kaplan and a few other people stayed in that race. Now, according to New York State's very undemocratic election law, they're not going to be able to run in the special if Tom Suozzi is the candidate. And I think a lot of us are assuming he's going to be the candidate. We won't know for sure. The party will pick the candidate. That's how it works in a special for either the state legislature or for Congress in New York. When there's a vacancy, the governor calls a special election, and the parties pick their candidates. So
Mhm.
the Democrats are going to pick their candidate. It's going to be the party officials, and the Republicans are going to pick their candidates. It's going to be party officials. There's not going to be a primary in this race. It's going to be a special, and the candidates are going to be chosen by the party apparatus. And it's something that needs to be changed. I've said it for literally for decades that it needs to be changed. But of course, the powers that be, the parties don't want to change it. They like to be able to pick their candidates.
Right, right. Do you know if the Republicans have anybody in the bullpen who they want to pick?
You know, there's no of the names that are being bandied around. There's no one that jumps out at you. There's no wow, that person is really going to be a great candidate. Um, I would think their best candidate would be Jack Martin, who is the state senator for that district. He had been a state senator before. Before that, he was the mayor of the village of Mineola. Very well known, but he has stated he's not running. Now, does he get his arm twisted over the next few days? I don't know. But there's no one in the Republican sphere of candidates that I look as impressive or intimidating as Tom Suozzi would be.
So, what do you think the future holds for George Santos?
Jail.
You really think so?
Yeah, he's going to go to jail. Um, I'm a former Securities and Exchange Commission lawyer, and I was trained by the best to sniff out fraud. And this guy didn't pass the smell test from the very beginning, and I think they have got him dead to rights. One thing about the Department of Justice when it comes to elected officials, um, they are usually very timid about bringing cases against elected officials for fear of being accused of being political. So usually, if they indict an elected official, they usually have the goods on them.
So, do you think George Santos will his name be known for decades to come? Do you think?
I, you know, we certainly in Queens and Long Island are going to know his name for a long time. Um, I'm not sure. I'm sure that down the road he becomes, an asterisk in American history. One of I think 6 Congress
Right.
members to be removed from office. And maybe a good trivia question. I think that's he's he's not going to have chapters in history books written about him. But where I'm from, we will remember George Santos.
And you think he's going to serve time?
I think he's going to serve time.
Do
The
you,
the bad part for him is that they threw him out because his his biggest and probably only bargaining chip was his seat. So I don't know what he negotiates now. If they came to him and offered him a certain amount of time behind bars, and he said, well, I'll agree to cop a plea and I'll give up my seat, and but I'll go do less time. That's usually how that works. But he doesn't have that chip to bargain with anymore.
Mhm. Hmm. Now, there's a book that came out Tuesday. It's called The Fabulist, and it's about George Santos. And it's written by a guy who writes for I don't know if he's a permanent staff member, but he writes for Newsday. And it came out Tuesday. And by Friday afternoon, I mean, Santos was gone.
He was gone. Well, you
Yeah,
still, I think people will still be interested in, uh, not in necessarily like how he's going to get out, but I think it's a good lesson to be learned, like how he got in,
right.
and and from the bad side and from the good side, because from the bad side, you know, how in the world does someone commit such a fraud? But on the good side, I mean, this guy came out of nowhere and won a congressional seat, and that's
Mm-hmm.
not an easy feat. I mean, he was a complete utter fraud, and he's going to go sit in a jail cell as far as what I predict. But at the same time, he did win a congressional race. 700 and I think 80,000 people in a district, and he won the election.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a small feat. I ran for city council early this year in a Democratic primary, and I didn't win. I mean,
Right,
he won in a he won in a congressional district.
right, right. So I think if his name does come up again, I think maybe you and I should have another conversation.
He's going to come up because these cases are going to be moving along, and sometime in 2024, not only are we going to have a special election in February, but you're going to have a trial, or potentially a trial or a plea. Something's going to happen. There's going to be some adjudication of his case.
So in February, do you think that Kathy Hochul is going to pick Swazi to be the next congressperson?
Well, she's the party's. It's not Kathy Hochul. It's going to be the party apparatus that's going to pick the candidates, not Kathy Hochul.
Okay.
So it's
And
going to be
that's
the chairman of the party in both Nassau County and New York State is Jay Jacobs. The
right,
power is in Jay on the Democratic side.
right, right,
But let's be honest. Kathy Hochul is the titular head of the New York State Democratic Party, and Hakeem Jeffries, who lives, one county over from Queens, which is, George Santos's district, is the majority leader and potentially the next speaker. And I'm sure, Joe Biden in the White House is going to have some input in who's going to be in Congress, because they you know Biden and Harris need that the Republicans out in the House. They've been in there. Let's see, what is it? It's December. They've been in there, 11 going on 12 months, and have done nothing. They have no accomplishment.
hmm
This is a body that does absolutely nothing. Think of all the legislation that Biden was able to get through: the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIP Act, the the infrastructure bill, lowering the costs of medicine and insulin. I mean, there was so much done in the first 2 years, and Republicans took control of the Congress, of the House, and everything came to a standstill. Nothing has gotten done, and the only thing that they've been able to do is, at last minute, do temporary funding bills so we can keep the government open. That's the
Okay,
only thing they've done.
I'm going to ask you one more question. What do you think Elise Stefanik's role was in the George Santos, the success of George Santos?
Elise Stefanik really stepped up and pushed George Santos. She endorsed him. She was out there on social media supporting him. I believe someone told me, I'd be honest, I can't vouch for her. I believe she ran fundraisers for him. I mean, she was all in. I think she's got a plan to try to be the speaker someday, God forbid. But, she had a lot to do. Her fingerprints are all over George Santos. Whether that's going to come back and hurt her, I don't know. She's part of that MAGA cult, and they don't seem to care about anything.
But my question is why? Why was she gung ho about him?
Well, like I said, I think that she sees herself as a future speaker. So why not help a young, 30-year-old congressional candidate in a winnable seat on Long Island
But
and
somebody
make
who
an
has,
ally?
but somebody who has so many flaws.
You know what? I don't think they care. I mean, if the Republicans are worried about flaws, there wouldn't be a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Lauren Boebert or a Gates or a Jim Jordan. I mean, they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, they don't care about flaws. They don't care about policy. They just care about, if you hate the same people they hate, then they're okay with you. And that's all they care about. I mean, if we're gonna if we had a problem with flaws, and don't get me wrong, we've got a handful of Democrats that have flaws too. I don't think anything that rises to the level of the crazies on the House Republicans, but we've got a handful too. But at the end of the day, they're not the people who are making the most noise or running the show. I mean, the House is being run. The lunatics are running the asylum in the House.
Mm-hmm.
And just if you go to the House Judiciary Committee Twitter or X, whatever they want to call it now, or you see the investigations that the House put out in social media nearly every day. It's a wacko conspiracy every day. It's not how you govern. I mean, Hunter Biden's laptop and Obama this and George Soros is funding everybody. They're crazy. But we can't look at them and say, are we worried about their flaws?
Mm-hmm. Mm. So, Steve, I'm sure we will talk again. So you've been listening to Steve Bihar. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. If you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Sorry. And I also created a new website called digitalcynthia.com. So if you have a chance, check it out. Steve, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.